And we are back. We apologize. If we think we got these kinks worked out, this is a first for all the technical difficulties we are experiencing tonight. But I am so excited that we are back live. So, Tanesha, if possible, just because I know that you were experiencing buffering and then we were having some sound quality issues, if you could just maybe repeat or start where you left off, and we will pick up from there while I let our some of our folks know that we're back live.
Okay, thank you. Again, sorry everyone for the technology issues. We were talking about traumas often observed with survivors, and I had referenced post-traumatic stress disorder, which is common when anyone experiences violence or harm, and that can involve the cycle of fear. I kind of gave an example of that. So like you have in your system, your body is consistently feeling this sense of fear. You're never feeling necessarily safe. And it
Mm-hmm.
can take some time to come from under that. We talked about shame, self doubt, also just social withdrawal, not wanting to be around people, not getting out and about. You kind of isolate yourself, as
Mm-hmm.
that can also be probably more than likely some sort of an abuse you experience is being isolated. So you continue that. Um, Yourself, and then the emotional numbness, not necessarily having those feelings because you've learned to suppress a lot of your feelings.
Awesome, 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 awesome. So, in your line of work, what type of traumas have you seen?
So, and are you referencing like the aftermath from like some say something they have experienced and how that has affected them?
Yes.
Um, One I think is that is pretty common that most people probably don't even recognize is if you have been in an abusive relationship, oftentimes those who have been physically abused or yelled at consistently, they tend to not do well with being around individuals or being in a conversation where a person talks with their hands.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't feel safe. I myself experienced that. I didn't do well with hand movements. And if you know if that's how some people communicate, also with raised voices. Um, if your voices are high pitched, you could not even be yelling or fussing about anything, not even be in an argument. But if someone just typically speaks at a higher pitch, that can be alarming and doesn't feel safe. Um, I will probably say, um, I'm trying to think of like unique ones. Going places, not feeling safe being alone
Mm-hmm.
ever. Locking doors, so you're pretty much barricading yourself in your home because you don't feel safe. Especially if you are one who has been stalked, um, or followed for any reason. You don't necessarily feel safe in any space, and so you're securing yourself. You could be overlocking doors and making sure, adding additional deadbolts. Consistently making sure you have people around you sometimes, or wanting people to stay in a home with you, never wanting to just be alone because you don't feel safe. So I would say those are a lot of the issues or traumas that are seen. Most of the time it's just dealing with everyday ordinary things with your with voice, gestures, tones.
So, would it be safe to say that if someone has, survived domestic violence and are stalking, that their central nervous system has basically been reprogrammed, and it seems as if they're always in like a fight or flight mode? And is it also safe to say that there's a level of hypervigilance as well?
Yes. Yes. I would definitely agree with you because it's all out of whack, right? What you knew and now what that has transitioned to or been trained and groomed to be is completely because you just had to learn to function a certain way. And that's all you know. And so for anything to be operating outside of that, it does not feel safe. I talk about one of the things I used to do, and I still do it to this day, but I feel safe in doing it was backing into parking spaces. And I did that so that I always had a way of escape. And I did that initially because I felt like I had a situation where I pulled into a parking space. My ex pulled in behind me. I had no way of escape because I had pulled into the parking space. And so for me, being able to just drive off versus having to put my car in reverse, then do all this maneuvering when I can just drive off, I can see what's coming. I can be prepared for what's coming to escape. And so now, I have a different stance on that, but essentially it's just things that and until you sit and dissect all of these things, Mary, you don't necessarily, it is your norm. So we could probably go through the house. I would even reference people who have, maybe they may not call it OCD, but like have OCD tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that is not uncommon for people to pick up kind of those things, to be like OCD, wanting things to be perfect, in place, in line, because you're used to making sure those things, or there might have been consequences, right? And so I had a thing with volume. It could only be on multiples of 5 or odd numbers. If the volume was on 6, well, it could be on 6 because that was an even, but if it was like 7, 11, all of those things, it created this thing. It's like, okay, this is not going to work. You got to put it on 12, so you don't even know how those things come about, but you somehow these behaviors develop, and it keeps you safe. As weird and odd as it may sound for people, it works. And then you have to work yourself out of those things. So to this day, my cabinets are like precision. so so precise with how things are turned, making sure they're all turned forward. And yeah, so
Wow. Wow. I think we can, I think towards the latter portion of the broadcast, we can maybe talk about some coping strategies, for some of our survivors, and ways in which they can help regulate their nervous system, and ways in which we can, you know, deal with, that fight or flight response.
mhm.
Why is it so? If there, let's just say, we have some singles that, that are dating or considering dating. And in the context of domestic violence, and abuse and stalking, why is setting boundaries so important?
It ensures your safety, and it is also a way for you to ensure that what you need and desire or want is not being manipulated, and that if you ever had a concern about something, setting those clear boundaries, you don't necessarily set yourself. Let me correct what I'm about to say. Being able to recognize the manipulation and abuse when
Mm,
you're setting those boundaries, um, it allows you to set the standard. It allows you to not um, to recognize where there's control and power dynamics that could possibly be coming in, because you can begin to ask yourself questions: what here is not working, because you have those boundaries. And if you don't have those boundaries, it's easy for someone to tell you what your boundaries are.
wow. Wow. So let's say, for example, so let's just give an example of a boundary and then a potential red flag. So let's say that, okay, I may not necessarily like talking on the phone, but when I do talk on the phone, I have a cutoff in which I'm willing to talk to someone, especially if especially if it's a man. So I don't like receiving phone calls, after 9 o'clock, for a number of reasons. Plus, I'm an early riser, so I like to go to bed early. So I would take it as a red flag. I first communicate to you my boundary. My boundary is I do not accept phone calls after 9 o'clock unless it's from a family member. And let's say it happens, once. Okay, fine. But if you do that every day and you start calling me at like 9:30, 10 o'clock, or if it's even later than that, I'm going to consider that's a red flag to me, because obviously I've clearly communicated a boundary to you and you have violated, that boundary. What's another boundary that we could possibly use to help not only set the tone, but also maybe alert us to a red flag?
So a common example, I would say, if you're what it looks like when we speak about jealousy, right? So that could potentially be a red flag. If you are, let's say, I'm gonna just use, let's say you're out, let's just use a woman, for example, and you're out, maybe you're doing well in your profession, you have a lot of things going for yourself, and um, you're receiving compliments. The way in which your friend, your partner may receive that or take that, and it seems as though instead of supporting your efforts, they may be diminishing it or indicating that maybe you're just not all of what you think you are, could be a red flag, because there could be some insecurities. If those insecurities are showing up, and it's like, because I over time and over years and working with this, I've seen a lot of times where we associate jealousy with, oh, this is cute, he really cares for me, oh, he is like protective of me.
Mm,
And sometimes, because we haven't taken time to really look at it, it's something that we should investigate more, for sure. It doesn't necessarily mean that is the case, but it will allow you to know whether this person has some insecurities, and there is nothing you can do about someone else's insecurities, and they will continue to show up, and it will continue to, then you will slowly but surely want to dim your light to accommodate their insecurities.
mm, that's good. That's good. So you had mentioned in your previous segment that there were different types of abuse, and I have a specific question about one of those types of abuse. But
Mhm.
just for the audience, like, is there a difference between domestic violence and abuse? I'm just wondering about the definition, and just to make sure there isn't any confusion.
Okay. So when we talk about domestic violence, so domestic violence is when there are abusive tactics which equate to domestic violence, right? So you
Hmm.
have abusive tactics, different ways that you can abuse a person who is an intimate partner,
Hmm.
that equals domestic violence. The confusion that does come in is people begin to take abuse and say, if it's with a family member, this is domestic violence. And that is what makes up, obviously, you can abuse a family member, you can abuse friends, you can abuse coworkers, but that is not domestic violence. And that often is what confuses people, um, when we're talking about domestic violence and abuse. Abuse is what makes up domestic violence.
Got it. Got it. So, what are the dynamics of abuse?
So, being that you're going through, if anyone, we often look at the Duluth model for the power and control wheel, and so we're talking about the physical, emotional, the psychological, the economic. But when we talk about the dynamics, we often don't consider that what's involved in the midst of how these things come about. And let's say I'm looking at, I'm actually going to look at. Um, One of the things we teach in the batter's intervention class. And so when
Hmm.
we start talking about emotional abuse, we often just equate that to calling names or putting someone down. But it is about playing mind games, right? A lot of these, when we talk about the dynamics, a lot of that goes into domestic violence and the different types of abuse. You are not necessarily any a chargeable offense. And so when you begin to deal with, sometimes when we're looking at age, right?
Hmm.
Uh, did this person intentionally get into a relationship with this younger person because they knew that that was a vulnerable population, that they would be more submissive? What other factors are we looking at besides the fact that this is physical abuse? And what does that look like? Kind of how we talked about the what does the incident look like? Because everybody who has experienced intimate partner violence, it doesn't necessarily look the same. Like I
Hmm.
gave you an example. I think we may have talked about this in the last section, and that was, I'm going to put sneakers in the dryer and just let them run all night, right?
Hmm.
And to go and actually share that story with someone who's going to believe you, or would anybody take that as that's something serious, or are you just making a big deal out of something that was nothing? So we're
And that's
considering so many factors: race, the intersectionality of a lot of different things. If you're part of the LGBTQIA plus community, you got to consider that and how that shows up too.
and then oh, I just lost my train of thought, but oh, it'll come back to me. We'll circle back. Um, in the previous in our previous podcast segment, you mentioned something called legal abuse. What is legal abuse, and can you give an example of it?
Yeah, so legal abuse occurs when an abuser misuses the court system. I want to emphasize misuses the court system or legal processes. So we often see that where it is excessive filings, um, motion after motion after motion after motion. And it's specifically for family court matters when there's a divorce and there are children involved. They will file motion after motion after motion, and it could be for the smallest thing. Maybe false reports,
Mm,
specifically if they want to paint the picture that the victim is crazy, filing a report with CPS, for example, to say you believe they're causing harm to the child.
mm-hmm.
And then consistently through the courts, they often will request that the victim gets a psych eval so they can continue to paint that narrative that they are crazy. Um, and kind of what I talked about, and then dragging out the custody process or the divorce process. And essentially, right, because if I have to show up for the motions. That also gives them opportunity. Now I have to look at you, be in your space. I'm also taking you away from work. You potentially, and most oftentimes, victims and survivors lose their jobs because they are consistently having to be in court. And you ultimately deplete the survivors funding. You know that they don't have a lot of resources most of the time, and it's specifically if the perpetrator, the abuser, was the breadwinner, then you know they don't have the income to continue to support being in court or um, hiring an attorney, and so you use that to your advantage.
And that's something that we didn't even think about, and that's something that, you know, that totally just boggles my mind. But that's the truth, because if you think about it, especially if you're talking about domestic relations cases, where typically those cases are billed by the hour. That's those aren't pursuant to our rules. You can't take on a family law case under a contingency fee. You can't do that. That's against the rules, the ethics rules. But that's something that we have to be mindful of, is the fact that that's the strategy that the perpetrator may put in place, again, to exhaust the other partner's funds,
Hmm.
to frustrate them in the process, to use the legal process to delay proceedings. Like, these are things that we don't think about.
It's so interesting that you said that because as many people know, there are resources for people to have legal representation at no cost based on their financial status. Um, and oftentimes, through the abuser's actions, they end up exhausting the victim's attorney, the survivor's attorney, to the point that the survivor's attorney is more so now saying, let's hurry up and get this over with, because they end up abusing the attorneys as well through their actions, and they exhaust everybody until they just want to give up. And then so what ends up happening, attorneys end up giving up on survivors.
Oh no.
They give up, and I'm saying give up because it's when you take on a case, you got to know when you have an abuser on the other end that it could be a long and taxing process. And I would rather, an attorney say up front, it's like, don't lie to me and say you're in this to the end with me and we're going to fight this, we're going to fight this. And then my abuser also exhausts you to the point then you begin to manipulate me and almost to make me feel that I'm not to have a voice anymore as well because you want to get it over and done with too.
Wow. And since we're talking about that and we're talking about the court process, the legal process, because again, commonly we'll see that, well, you'll see that with divorce cases and child custody cases. Again, domestic relations,
Mm-hmm.
very, very
Mm-hmm.
common. Why is it so? Okay. Why do survivors, because I'm sure this is a question that some of our audience members may have, why do survivors stay in their abusive relationships? Why do they stay in those?
If fear, fear at the top of the list, right? The threats. So you have the fear, you have the threat. They've already been told, if you leave, I dare you to leave. I
Mm-hmm.
will do this if you leave. Or I
Mm-hmm.
will do this if you say something, right? So you have the fear and the threats. And I know people don't think that that is huge sometimes. And they're like, okay, whatever, you can leave, just call the police. But those are real threats to the people who have to hear it. And they are not willing to underestimate the person, their abuser, who is telling them that. On the lack of resources. As we know, there are a lack of resources across the country for survivors of domestic violence. There are not enough shelters. The shelters are typically always full. And even if the shelters are not full, even if there's a domestic violence shelter with beds available, if you have a large family, those shelters are not adequate for you because typically they're only set up to cover maybe a family of four or five. So if you are a family and you're a mother with six plus children, you're probably not going to be able to get in a shelter. On top of the fact, if you have a range of children, let's just say you have a college, maybe your um, child just graduated from high school. Maybe they're not going to college. In our minds, that's still our child, right? Even though they might have just turned 18. Well, they're not going to be able to go into the shelter because they're considered an adult, especially if it's a male, right? So, the financial dependency. My abuser is the breadwinner. Therefore, I don't have anywhere to go and I don't have any money to go to leave and go anywhere. On top of the fact that maybe the abuser is also isolated the survivor from family and friends, and so they don't feel that they can reach out. And the concern for children, right? We talked about that 75% increase in a homicide and suicide of when a victim is trying to leave. Also, the knowing that they can potentially cause harm for the child. We've seen too many cases where the children end up murdered because, and this made to feel like it is the fault of the victim because they were trying to leave. It's like, look what you made me do to the children. This is your fault, and they don't want to wear that. Um, Social or family pressures and kind of like even what we talked about with ministry. So
Mm-hmm.
how many times have I heard family members who have taught daughters to have a good man? I'm thinking about the Tyler Perry movie in particular, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
there's that conversation. It's like, what are you complaining about? You have all the riches and wealth and you don't have to work. You don't have to do anything. You have all of this. What are you complaining about? Suck it up. Make sure this man got a good meal. Make
Mm-hmm.
sure he has a warm meal when he comes home, and make sure the house is clean and tuck your head. So all of those things that tells us that we should be staying in that relationship. And trauma bonding.
Mm. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. What's
So
trauma bonding?
that it, and I'm gonna give it to you the plain way, and that's when I got my own traumas, you got your traumas, and we're connecting on our trauma.
Oh,
You know what? We got a whole lot in common. We can meet each other's emotional needs. I feel you, you feel me, and don't nobody understand us or what we went through but us.
mm, mm,
And so we gotta stay like this. We gotta stay connected and we're going to be each other's ride or die because don't nobody understand what we went through. And
Wow.
so we stay connected and we bond over our traumas, and ultimately it's a disaster. I've seen way too many, and having these conversations oftentimes in groups I facilitate, they talk about how abusive the relationship is, because the only conversation they could ever have that was not when they weren't fighting was when they were sharing about their traumas. And then they cry, they make up, but they had nothing else to offer one another but pain and sorrow and grief. And that's what their relationship was built upon. And so this is the only person, you sell it like this is the only person who will ever understand me, who gets it. So why would I leave that person?
Wow. Wow. This is why perspective and perception is so important, because either A, what we've experienced or what we've been exposed to will shape, how we view these situations. For
Hmm.
someone, for people that have never experienced this is probably eye opening. For people that have experienced this or know someone that's experienced this could be pretty triggering. And I do apologize to my audience. I was supposed to give a disclaimer at the very beginning. So if you're watching now, 26 minutes or so later, um, I do want to just say that viewer discretion is advised. We are talking about some adult subject matter, so that may not be appropriate for children. So you may want to either put in your earbuds or make sure you listen to this when the kids are not around, because we are talking about some things, again, that are not suitable or appropriate for children. And before we get back to our conversation, I just wanted to share a comment that Pastor Ash-Shakoor had shared a moment ago. He said another example is in terms of abuse or intimate partner violence, the control dynamics, a partner or a spouse, excuse me, are not able to freely choose what they wish to wear. There's another instance, and this is prevalent, where there's abuse by law enforcement partners by the spouse. They're basically shielded by their position or the uniform, and the victims,
Hmm.
the survivors, may feel helpless because why would I call the police when my partner works for the police, because they're going to
Hmm.
take his side over mine.
Yes. And so can I speak to the law enforcement
Yes,
component?
yes.
Um, so in my time of doing this work, I have seen this. I have seen the victim incarcerated and children stripped from her, and had to fight her way back to her children through the system. And not only did the local community not want to support, didn't even if they wanted to support or assist or help, what a lot of agencies or organizations were doing, they were wanting to refer out just because of who the abuser actually was, which was law enforcement.
Hmm.
And so nobody else also wanted to wear the weight of what could come to them, or how, because the the reality is when you're doing this work, you just don't know if you're putting a target on your back. And
Mm.
so for any agency or organization specifically who would want to help this law enforcement victim who was I put out as if she was the perpetrator, they wanted hands off, and would refer around hoping someone would help her. They just were not, they just didn't want to touch it because, right, we have relationship with law enforcement. Law enforcement makes referrals to our organization, and I don't think that that's a conflict of interest. Like we come up with everything, but it's like it is our job to protect or to provide a service if someone comes and says they're needing help, and we know it's not uncommon. Even with the gap that we talked about in address confidentiality program, right? That passed a few years ago. And the question I had asked, I was like, okay, so what if when we're doing address confidentiality, what if the abuser is a police officer?
Mm-hmm.
And they was like, wow, we didn't really think about that because, right? Because they're going to have access to these systems.
To lean. They're
And
gonna have lean
yes,
access.
right. And so when you think about that, they was like, oh, you have to make sure it's like red flag, making sure that you put a note. It's just like put a note on it.
Mm-hmm.
But how can we guarantee that note is seen? How do we know? It's like putting an asterisk. Make sure you put an asterisk so that we'll make sure that law enforcement, that we know that the abuser is law enforcement, right? That's not enough when we're talking about someone's safety.
Right. It's not. It's not. And if we have time, maybe towards the latter portion, I was going to maybe ask you about, kind of what legislation at least we may have on the books. So I'll keep an eye on the time and maybe we can revisit that because I'm sure that there are plenty of our viewers that have those types of questions, like, what type of protections, are out there besides the PPO.
Hmm.
Um, and I do want to make sure we kind of talk about, safety plans. So here's a big question that I have. So there may be instances where we may recognize when someone is being abused, like there's physical abuse. Obviously, there's evidence of like bruising, scratches and or contusions. But what are some signs in which someone may be abused outside of like physical abuse?
Okay, so if I can take a little bit of time because I really want to hone in on this of
Yes.
what we're seeing, and so I'm going to kind of go through some examples that we touch on in our batterers intervention program that oftentimes even the abusers didn't even know was considered abusive. And so when we talk about intimidation, um, driving recklessly. So we got into an argument. Now I start speeding,
Okay.
right? It is something like that. And I think that's more common than we think. Slamming doors, um, tensing up the body, or I act crazy. So I try to portray like I'm crazy. Um, Stomping around the house, stalking him or her by checking email, phone logs, using GPS systems, um, or display clean. So hear this: I display, clean, or play with a gun and or knife in front of them. Right? I didn't threaten them. I never said anything. I just displayed it. Maybe I started cleaning the gun in front of them. That is an intimidating or can be an intimidating factor. Um, the emotional abuse we talk about, I think we always talk about the basic, but making false promises, things that people don't consider, making false promises saying that, yep, we're going to get married or I'm going to do this. And you're just always playing this waiting game. Being sarcastic, fake listening. So you're not really listening to what I'm saying. You keep making promises. You're fake listening to part of my conversations. Um, you negative compare him or her to other people. Set expectations that for him or her that are too high, that I could never obtain or potentially, and making hurtful jokes. So when we talk about obfuscation, so obfuscation is one that often gets people, right, where I can minimize or justify my behaviors, no matter what I do. And so you deny or abuse, you deny that you abuse somebody, you minimize or play down or make light of abusing the person.
Mhm.
Um, You blame or shift responsibility. So these are all those things that are not physical that we often see. And obfuscation is a huge one. I lie about my behavioral situations to gain advantage. I'm lying to gain. I hide, withhold, or omit information. I use my drinking or drug use to excuse my being abusive. That is a very common one. People truly believe that their drinking and drug use causes them to be abusive. It takes away their conscience for consequences, but the thoughts are already embedded in them, and that's why when they use drugs or alcohol, they don't. It's easier to perform it because they are not of sober thinking at that time. Um, Tell long stories with unnecessary details that ultimately blame the victim. Right. So
Mm,
you take. I think that that's something people forget about. We talk about using others. So using children to relay messages, abusive behaviors, using child visitation to harass your victim, threatening to get custody of the children. Just the idea that you continue to make this threat that you're going to take the children away from me. Degrading the partner, um, using the job, family, friends, religion to leverage control. So always trying to have that leverage over someone. Then we talk about male privilege,
mhm,
defining what men and women's roles are. I define or say what is and what is not important.
right.
I enforce the rules. I demand this level of respect. We talk about economic abuse, threats and coercion, um, even sexual abuse and violence. So in our program, we often talk about even cheating on someone, being abusive, because of the detriment, and the lack of thought, that can often how it causes harm to the person. And makeup sex that people don't often talk about. I think the world's always been taught, right? Makeup sex is a good thing. But a lot of times, if people are honest, people have makeup sex because they feel like that's what they need to do in the moment to change the dynamics of an argument.
Wow. 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 Because I think you briefly alluded to the makeup sex during um, our last segment, but I'm glad that you explained the dynamics behind it because is it something that the other person really wants to engage in, or are they doing that merely to appease their partner to avoid future abuse?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow. Um, if possible, I probably won't be able to share the whole thing, but if would you be able to provide me with that list because I would like to share
Yes.
some of that, with our viewers because I know you listed off a lot, and some of those we wouldn't even fathom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
And
thank
there
you.
are so many more, so I will definitely share that.
Yes, because obviously there are signs that we automatically think of off the top of our head, and there's other signs that are more subtle in nature that we wouldn't even consider um,
Mm-hmm.
either. So I want us to talk about safety plans and what they are. But before we do that, like let's say I have a friend that's currently experiencing like intimate partner violence. Like
Mm-hmm.
what and just given the many hats that I wear. So what should I do when I see these signs? So okay, I may not have seen, her partner lay hands or assault her, but I know that the abuse is going on in the background. I know that she's currently abusing domestic violence, or I know that she's currently experiencing stalking. Like what can I do?
Sometimes I think this is the easiest and hardest question of all. Because the reality is we as a friend, as a family member, can only show love and compassion and continue to be in this person's life in in a normal way. So I think if there's an opportunity for a conversation, if you truly have that relationship, you can't. I definitely, I can't say like, oh, you need to pry in this person's life. You need to ask them things, but I always tell people, compared to if you had a family or a friend who's in a car accident, what would you do? You would check in on them. You would ask them if they needed anything. Are they okay? Is there anything they want to talk about? How are you feeling? Those everyday basic questions you will is the goal so that they hear that there's somebody that cares and loves them. Because at the end of the day, if you pry too much or you insinuate or accuse them of being in an abusive relationship, you
Mhm.
could kill the dynamics of the relationship. And you want to be able to keep that space open. So if and when they decide they do want help or they want to have that conversation, they will come to you. I think we have to be mindful of our conversations around friends in everyday life, because if you've been my friend for the last 15 years and all I heard you talk about when we're watching social media and we see an abusive scenario or somebody, we see that somebody was murdered on the news station, and we're both sitting there and I hear you going like, oh, I wish a man would, I wish, and you know how those conversations get
Mhm.
riled up. If that's what I hear you continuously saying, that now that I'm going through something, I'm not going to come to you because I already know you have a formulated opinion about a woman who would, per se, and I'm quoting this because most people say, oh, she allowed herself to be abused or she's allowing herself. And I think we have to be careful with our choice of words because nobody wants to allow themselves, but we're this is still survival for us. And so even if you have that conversation, ask them how are they doing. If and when they do share their information, you have
Mhm.
to ask them what is it that they want, because it's not up to you. And oftentimes we want to tell them they need to leave. They already know that. You're not telling them anything they don't already know. They know this is not ideal situation. This is not a situation that they fathom for themselves either. And but to just say leave when you don't have any, you don't know the makeup of their everyday life. You don't also know, we're only getting what they're willing to share in that moment. And for us to make a decision about someone's life and what they should do next is really insensitive to all the facts that we don't have in front of us.
Wow. Wow. That's powerful right there. So you see me looking down. I'm monitoring the Facebook chat, and Zamaria had a question. So she said, "What about when someone stays for comfort? Like it's not constant, but maybe a few times a year they may be experiencing these signs."
So can you repeat the question so I'm sure that I heard this correctly?
Okay, so she says, "What about?" Zamaria says, "So what about when someone stays for comfort? So what about when someone stays for comfort? Like it's not constant, but maybe a few times a year."
So they're staying with the abuser for
That's what it
comfort?
That's what it sounds like. And Zamaria, if
Okay.
if we're if I didn't say that clearly, let me know. Put it in the chat or the comments, and I'll relate it. But it sounds like yes.
Okay. So I want to be careful how I answer this because that can very well be the case. If a person is only staying or visiting or sleeping with this person sporadically throughout the year, the internal work is for that person. And what I mean by that is, because when we talk about comfort, we have to begin to define, how do we define comfort, and why is he or she your comfort? Right? Is it you need somebody just to be in the home? Is it the sexual connection that's bringing you comfort? Like I would say I need more context to that to really answer it, but my concern is relating abuse with comfort, that often becomes the case. That does become your comfort because that's what you know. However, it begins to paint a false sense of comfort for us because what
Mhm.
we're identifying now is not comfort. We are becoming comfortable with trauma. We are becoming comfortable with abusive behavior, not so much with the person. Um, and what are we then telling ourselves indirectly of what we deserve and how worthy we are? And so I think that somewhere in there, it would be great to probably do some um, internal work. And I'm speaking from a person who left a very abusive relationship and still began to sneak to see my abuser. So when you talk about comfort, I, I would probably err on the side for me that it wasn't about comfort. It was that chaos became my norm. And
Mhm.
without it, I did not know how to function. And so when we began to say this abuser brings me comfort, has it become the norm? Has it become all you know? And that he basically, it has been outlined that you can't have more.
Let me give you some more context because we do have some more context. So, in terms of the sometimes, and in terms of what the abuser actually provides, so they are a married couple. Again, this is a hypo. So, they are a married couple, and the abuser um, is like the financial provider. Okay. And the perpetrator or the abuser provides shelter and insurance and a way for, a way for the children.
That would become where we talk about the barriers to leaving an abusive relationship, right? Because there
Mm-hmm.
it speaks to the comfort is all the barriers. It is the financial dependency,
Mm-hmm.
right? So my recommendation there would be this is where when we started talking about safety planning.
Mm-hmm.
So so let me go back. So they're married, they have all these. Is it about what is the question in terms of what are they wanting to know about it again?
Let's see if she puts it back. If we get a little clarification. I'm checking the chat here. I'm waiting for the
Okay.
for her to
Because I
respond.
just couldn't remember if it was about trying to leave, like what do they do? Is that
Mm-hmm.
still abusive? Yes, I would tell you if a person is abusive, that's still abusive. But I
Okay.
please understand that's one of the things we're talking about. That is a barrier, right? They're providing everything, that financial dependency, because they're providing for the children. They provide putting a roof over your head. They're providing the insurance. Safety planning can consist of building that up over time so that you financially build yourself up. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what does that look like? Having someone have a conversation and say, I'm not saying you got to leave right now, but I am saying, okay, if you so desire to do that a year from now, let's start today with talking about what that looks like. Okay, do you have a job already? Do you desire to have a job? Are you allowed to work? Okay, what options are out there? Because I think a lot of times survivors get stuck because they don't have a roadmap of how to get out. And we
Okay.
have to show them those baby steps of how to build, and safety planning can do that.
Okay. So two things. Um, two things. So um, I think you were asking for clarity in the question. She was asking, was that abuse? Was that abuse? That was her question. Would that have been considered abuse?
If the person is just solely being a provider,
No, not necessarily being a provider, but let's just say the person is staying for comfort, and there obviously there's some type of issues. There's not everyday issues, but there may be some signs that are occurring. There's some signs of possible. I don't know as far as saying abuse, because I know the question specifically is it abuse, but there's some signs or some flags of things that are currently occurring, and she's wondering if it may be abuse, even though it's not happening on a regular basis. And the spouse, the wife, is staying because you know the person is like their provider, and the person is making a way for the kids, providing the insurance and so forth.
I'm sorry. I just feel like I'm not clear about, okay, I guess I don't. So I'm trying to identify what behavior are we trying to figure out is abusive.
Yes.
That's what I'm not clear about. Like what's happening that we're trying to figure out is abuse. Because just because like a man is providing food, water, shelter, insurance, taking care of their children, that's not necessarily abusive. It is if you're not, there are other. I will have to know like what are the other things that are happening
Mm-hmm.
that could bring concern that something is abused. Because just because you're a wife that doesn't provide all that and the husband provides all that doesn't make it abusive because he's doing that. It's like, is he allowing you to do anything? Or
Sometimes there's tussling.
yes, that's abusive.
Okay.
Anytime people are putting hands on one another, it's abusive.
Okay.
We don't have to question if that is anytime someone is putting hands on you, the why does not matter. It is a personal choice for someone to put their hands on you, no matter what the scenario is. And what I want to be clear, because I think a lot of times when we're dealing with domestic violence, we often just relate it as a toxic relationship. Oh, they're both putting hands on each other. We have to look at the in abuse, there's never equal playing field. Can it get to a point where there's a person abusing and then a person gets tired and then they begin to respond or react to that abusive behavior? Now what the world is seeing, a family friend saying, oh, now they always in the house fighting or they fighting each other. There is a power and control dynamics there that we just don't know about or we don't see.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, bottom line, it is abusive. It is physical abuse to be putting your hands on someone. And because it has happened more than once, that is not where it started. It never starts with the physical abuse. So, yes.
Thank you.
And it only escalates.
Mm. Thank you for clarifying that. And thank you, Zamaria, for providing some clarification on the scenario. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I want to go back to what we were talking about because we were talking about a safety plan. And I imagine safety plans are going to vary for each situation. So
Mhm.
what goes into a safety plan, and kind of give an example of like a safety plan?
Okay, so safety plan, I want to emphasize, are personalized. No two safety plans are going to look alike because they're going to be catered specifically for your life and strategies that you feel like keep you safe in preparation for leaving, maybe once you leave, or in case of any type of emergency. So I'm going to give some examples, and then I have an example kind of like of safety planning and questions and details we kind of ask.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so just examples: pack an emergency bag, establishing code words, like if you need help, memorizing numbers. I know we often use our cell phones and probably don't even remember our mom and daddy's numbers anymore because but you have to imagine that, your abuser may take your phone, you don't have access. Do you have those numbers in memory? And safe places to go. Those are the start. And so when you're safety planning, this is whether like is the perpetrator out of the home? Does this perpetrator live in a home? Are they
Mm-hmm.
out of the home? That is an important factor to consider. So do we need to have the locks changed? So change your locks or make sure the locks of windows and doors work. Those are basic things like going around your house and looking, right? What are the security systems and talking to your neighbors, right? We're not a world that talks to neighbors much anymore, but letting your neighbors know if there is something that is going on, you're having concern, alerting your neighbors to be on watch for things as well, because they may see something and they may be able to save your life because you may be asleep and they may be paying attention and they may be able to call the police and it could save your life. Um, Safety during a violent episode. So I think this is important. And when we say violent, there, I mean, everybody has a different the definition of what they may consider violent. This is critical for if you have children too, because sometimes your children have to become part of that safety plan, even if you don't want to get them involved. So thinking about the rooms that are not safe to be in during a violent episode.
Mm,
So, right, you might not want to be in the kitchen because that gives you access to knives, gives him or her, your abuser, access to knives, right?
mhm,
Maybe we want, consider, am I in a room where guns are stored? We may not want to be in that room. So just being mindful of those things. Anywhere where potential weapons can be. I know some people may be thinking, well, that's the room I want to be in case I need to defend myself. But what people don't realize that victims end up being killed by the perpetrator, by the weapons more so than they are able to um, cause harm to the perpetrator.
mhm,
Oftentimes, those weapons are taken from them and they are harmed by the weapons they intended to use towards their perpetrator. Keeping a spare key within reach so you can easily leave. That is something that people should consider because oftentimes they do take your keys, right? That's something that often happens. Keeping a set of clothes, medication, other things that you might need in a safe place, right? So if I am one, I think about refugees,
mhm,
those who have visas, passports, anything of that nature where someone can just, take that, destroy such things. And you need having those copies readily available somewhere that you can have additional copies for yourself.
mhm,
Kind of what I talked about earlier, backing your car in so that all you have to pull out of a drive is to pull out and drive. That's important. Going to safety when preparing to leave your perpetrator, right? Think about the safest way to leave. So thinking about, um, you got to think about the situations that may lead your perpetrator, how this perpetrator is going to react. So being served with the divorce papers or protection order, court dates, plan for these events, always making sure you're planning and anticipating what the reaction will be. Um, Talking with an attorney and thinking of ways that you can help in your independence. So a lot of what the question that just came
mhm,
about that independence, is there a way for you to hide money from your abuser? Is there a way? And I'm not talking about putting large numbers. I know it might not seem like hey, if I can put 50 cents, a dollar, whatever it may be, is there a way for you to begin to hide money? If you are not staying in the house, can you apply for housing ahead of time and have any correspondence sent to a safer location? So what are those things that you can be doing and thinking about all financial issues that may come up? So do you have a joint checking account? And does he or she have access to like your to social security checks, all those various things, like having access to that because you want to be stripped of that. Safety away from home, being mindful. Do I need to change my routine? How do I go home when I'm running errands? What does that look like during my lunch? Because this is people, when you're at work and you think I'm just going to grab lunch, you need to
mhm,
be mindful. Where are you going? What time of day? Because if your routine was when I was with this person, they knew that I went to Chick-fil-A typically on my lunch about 12 noon, then guess what? You probably don't need to go to Chick-fil-A at 12 noon anymore. You might need to go to one on the other side of town or just not go to Chick-fil-A at all. Um, Include a friend when running errands. And so if you don't include them, always let somebody know where you are
mm,
and that you're going. If you know there's an issue. Um, Carry a cell phone with 911 and emergency contact number programmed, right? So you might have, right, you could have a what you call the phones?
burners, the burner
Like
phones,
you're
right?
like a burner phone, right? Yep, having a burner phone just for that emergency versus your standard phone, right? That might be an additional phone that your perpetrator doesn't know about. I know that you may not want to, but letting someone at work know what your situation is, because we often have seen when perpetrators have shown up to the jobs and cause harm, and and it's important for people that you work with to know that that could potentially happen because their lives are at stake at that moment too. whether we want to believe that or not, safety and the children, if your children are aware of the situation, they're already going to be feeling anxious. Um, they do not need to know the details, but telling them about the ways you are protecting yourself may lessen their anxiety.
Mm.
Um, and so teaching your children how and when to call 911, that is important because they can be part of that process. And putting that into practice, oftentimes we don't want to, we wait till the crisis happens to try to see if our plan works.
Mm.
And
Mm.
we, at the moment, we're frantic, all the emotions, people are crying, children are all over the place. It's not going to work. So practicing that and putting it into place, like, hey, when this happens, what do we say you're going to do? Are you going to, you're going to grab your little sister, you're going to take her upstairs and then you're going to put her in the closet. Like having those details, if you have an older sibling who can step in to help with the younger kids, because you think about a mom who has 6 or 7 children, she's not going to be able to get herself to safety and get all the children to safety, maybe in a little bit amount of time. So that's important. Um, so they talk about playing the what if game. So like whatever stranger comes to the door, how do you repeatedly reinforce like safety issues with your children so that they
Mhm.
know and they begin to learn, even if this is a familiar face, what does it feel safe about it? And to teach your children to begin to trust their own intuitions. Um, and helping your children plan for visitations
Wow.
because I when systems are continuously making children visit with the parent who has caused harm, the perpetrator, the children are struggling. They are struggling. Um, So where is it safe to go? Let's just say they don't have supervised parenting time and
Mhm.
the children being understand where does it feel safe for them to go? Maybe they would rather just go and sit at McDonald's all day or do something. And who can they call for help if they don't feel safe during the visitation? And where is a safe place to exchange for visitation? You as a survivor have the ability to have input into that. So think about that, especially if you're going to be the one that has to do the exchange. You want to consider what feels safe for you and your children to do that exchange. And particularly somewhere maybe with cameras, maybe where law enforcement, so
Mhm.
that they know in a public place that they know eyes are on them and that there is visibility. um, and then I'll just quickly go so talking about like doing the process of filing a PPO and after
Mhm.
filing, because you're wanting to consider how they're feeling. If your perpetrator does not know where you are at, filing a protective order may result in him or her finding out, right?
Mhm.
Because that is obviously placed up there unless you indicate it. Sometimes you don't want that address disclosed. So those are just, I know that's like a lot. It's like technology. Um, it's so many just different things, but that is a safety planning can be important for the family.
I had two more follow-up questions. One is related to the safety plan. So, e- especially in instances where you may share the car. So, what
Mm.
about the instance where the partner has your extra set of car keys? What do you do?
So you're saying, okay, we share a car
Hmm.
and they have both sets. Like they have
Yes.
your set and their own set. So
Yes.
I think this is where we talk about what can you do without the other partner knowing. For example, are you able to obtain or have a key made that you yourself can just keep stored or hidden somewhere, compartment somewhere that they
Hmm.
don't have access to or won't readily find. Um, and nowadays, if the car, say for instance, um, and specifically you're saying like, what if I need to leave and they have the keys?
Or let's just say, for example, so you've got two sets of keys. He has his set. I have my set. I leave the car. But since he has and not leave the car, I take the car. But let's say, okay, I go to an undisclosed location. He finds me and he has my extra set of keys. What do I do? Because he may end up taking the transportation. Because that's the concern that I would have.
Okay, you're at an undisclosed location. He finds you, and now you're like, oh, now he's gonna just leave with this car.
Yes.
Okay, so I will go back to say that's something we you have to be prepared for, right? That could happen, and if it leaves you stranded, what am I gonna do if I'm stranded? Am I gonna call him? Probably not. That is probably not what we want to do. However, do I need to get somewhere? Do I need to call 911? Am I going to call 911? Whose numbers do I have memorized that I can
Mm-hmm.
call to come and get me?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, is Uber and who I don't know all the other options readily
Live.
available to me?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Do I have funding? Have I built up this secret account for
Mm-hmm.
this type of emergency situation? Because we have to, again, the fact that it's even in our mind that that could potentially happen, then we know our abuser enough to say that, yep, they will probably show up and leave me here stranded, take the car, so I'll be stranded. And so in that safety plan, you want to prepare for that possibility that if I go to an undisclosed location, he will find me. Like a given. I used to be like, I know when I get here, he's going to find me. I was just giving myself a window of opportunity. Within 24 hours, he will have found me. Then what?
Mm.
And you continue to plan because we typically know our abusers better than anyone. And so the fact that you can even come up with that as a potential strategy of what might happen, then you need to create a plan for it.
Wow. 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 So my last question before we wrap up, um, how can like ministry leaders, so how can us folks that serve in ministry or our ministry leaders, how can we be a part of someone's safety plan? Like, what does that look like?
So I would equate it to um, first ask yourself as a ministry leader, are you a place of refuge?
Mm.
Are you truly a place of refuge? Because if you can't answer that, then you probably are not, you shouldn't present yourself as an option for them in a safety plan. Um, but in the safety plan, if you are going to be part of that process, that is a conversation that the ministry leader should have with um, someone experiencing abuse.
Mm-hmm.
What are they honestly willing to do and not do? So, and I think that that's an authentic conversation that has to so when this safety planning is happening, the people
Mm-hmm.
that you want to be part of your safety plan, they need to have, you need to address this with them because you can't make people part of your safety plan and never tell them they're part of the safety plan. So if ministry leaders are going to be involved, there has to be this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just say, I think about, say, churches, for example, who have housed homeless communities, in different when it's been cold, right? So if I were to call you as a ministry leader and say, I was just, beat up, this person did that to me, I have nowhere to go. What are you willing to do, and what are you not willing to do? Because I can say all day that safety plan means, oh, the ministry leader has said they're gonna come and pick me up on the corner of St. Joe and MLK.
Mm-hmm.
That could be the plan. That's gonna be our meeting spot, right? No matter time or day. But if I'm not willing to do that, But maybe I'm the person to say, when you call me, I will notify law enforcement that you're on the corner of St. Joe,
Mm,
right? Because we all have to be careful about putting positioning ourselves when there's intimate partner violence, because you're putting yourself at risk and could potentially be putting yourself in danger, right? And so
mhm.
I think that for safety planning for ministry leaders, being realistic about what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do. And that could be, if when I make that call to say I need help and I need support, that you will be the person then to pick up the phone while I'm gathering my children. You will be making a phone call to 911, telling them and dispatching them to come to this location at, of wherever I am. And then once I am with law enforcement, I can then call you and you are willing to come and pick up my children if need be, so that I can seek shelter, because I don't want my children in the shelter. So I think that those are the conversations that just have to be had. Um, and we have to be honest and not try to be um people's savior,
Mhm.
because I think we have great hearts and intentions, but then when that call comes, we were like, man, I'm scared, I ain't really trying to get involved in this, right? Maybe you're just the person to call 911 for them, and
Wow.
that's okay.
Because that goes back to the earlier part of our conversation where, um, we all have big hearts and we're eager to help, but there are limitations that we don't necessarily have the requisite training
Hmm.
to handle these types of situations. So this is an instance where we can still help and still allow those that have the specific training to intervene
Hmm.
accordingly.
Hmm. Because maybe you're going to be the person that notifies my family
Mm-hmm.
that, that, okay, she called, she's safe, and she's, they're taking her to a shelter now, and then when she's gone through intake, she's going to give you a call. I just wanted to give you an update as her mom that she's safe, right?
Mm-hmm. I know we've heavily talked about, domestic violence, intimate partner violence. I did have one follow up question related to stalking. So, if someone is being stalked, what should they do? And when does law enforcement actually become involved?
So, um what you should always do, which is priority, is documentation. Documentation is your best friend. So document all the incidents, right? Because stalking, as they will tell you, is not a one time. It cannot be a one time. They showed up when I was at Walmart and they knew I was going to be at Walmart, and they're there too, right? That's unfortunately, even though you know in your heart of hearts that they're here stalking you, it's just not going to be enough, right? You have to show this repetition and behavior. So
Mm-hmm.
documenting the incidents and save whatever evidence. If you have footage, you've recorded something, make sure you keep all of that. And because of the stalking, you will want to make sure that you're increasing your personal and digital safety. Anything that can continue to protect you. So in the midst of you gathering this evidence, still do the things that you need to do to protect yourself as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Again, by with that personal and digital safety. So, and changing your routines, doing all these different things as well. With law enforcement should, I'm going to emphasize that word, should be involved if there are threats or
Mm-hmm.
fear for safety, right? So I always tell people, don't ever doubt. Call if you feel that this is worthy of calling. Um, because all they can do is tell you, no, this is not enough. No, or they can come out and tell you, okay, we don't have enough. But maybe that's just what you need to at least know that someone, because right, once the police come out and they at least do documentation to say they reported out, that's another layer of documentation for you to get a
Mm-hmm.
copy now of that police report to say, hey, I reported it. I called the police on this date because I saw them driving past my house. Right now, you have that documentation to add to your file, even if the law enforcement says, "Okay, this is not enough. Let us know if you see them again, and we'll come back." Um, when you contact police, uh, make sure that you're clearly stating the threats and providing that documentation, and then request the report after. So a lot of times, what I have seen, even with personal protection orders, is people are not very clear about what's happening. Talk about the facts, and I want to say only the facts, because when you're telling the story, law enforcement, judges, nobody has the time, I hate to say it like that, to figure out the story. They want the facts. And if you're giving them a bunch of other stuff on top, like talking about, you know, well, I think they have this mental health issue. I'm concerned about this. I think that this might be, they're gonna lose what they're really there for, to really be addressing the stalking. They're trying to get the facts. And so all of the evidence that you're saying, that this person keeps showing up, this person is harassing me, this person is stalking me, focus on that and try to stay um that timeline is important, because you're showing them, you need to show them the repetitive behavior
Mm-hmm.
and incidents, and get that out first. Make sure that is at the forefront before you have any other conversations.
Because you mentioned something really important, and it's really important that the conduct is emphasized, because stalking is like a legal term. Like if you were to look up Michigan compiled laws, I mean that's it's in one of the sections.
Mm-hmm.
um, this person is harassing me, like these are legal terms. And again, we're not giving out legal advice, but what we're trying to say
Mm-hmm.
is, if you're going to report this to law enforcement, you have to describe the behavior. So if it's a repetitive pattern of hate behavior that's causing fear or making you uncomfortable or making you feel intimidated, so what is it? So are they calling your phone excessively? Like if they're calling 100 times a day, if they're sending you text messages constantly in your phone, you're getting all these types of alerts. Or this person is lurking outside of your home at odd hours of the day, every day of the week. Or are they sending you letters and different things like that after you've told them that this contact is unwanted and it's not desired, and do not contact me? So focus on that. I know that it's
Mm-hmm.
easy to want to add all these extraneous facts, because what you have to keep in mind, the officer is going to draft a police report, and he's going to send that police report to a prosecutor, an assistant prosecutor, and the assistant prosecutor is going to read that police report, and they're looking to see if the elements have been satisfied under
Yes.
the statute, under the criminal statute. There's certain things that have to be spelled out in that police report in order for those charges to be authorized. That is why it is so important for you to describe the conduct. Um, be as specific as possible. And like Tanesha previously said, make sure you're documenting everything, because one instance is not enough. Again, it has
Mm-hmm.
to be repetitive.
Mm-hmm. And if I can just really quick, Mayor, I'm looking at, and this is from the Personal Protection Office here in Ingham County, and this
Mhm.
is on their site. They list out all the PPOs, the three types of personal protection orders, and then they list out the stalking, which is considered a non-domestic PPO,
Mhm.
and it's clearly defined here. It says, to qualify for a stalking non-domestic PPO, you are not required to show a relationship with the respondent. However, you must establish that the respondent has shown a pattern of behavior, including two or more separate incidents that would cause a reasonable person to feel terrorized, frightened, intimidated, threatened, harassed, or molested, and that actually causes the person to feel terrorized, frightened, intimidated, threatened, harassed, or molested.
Oh, thank you for including that language. And again, just for our audience members, because again, we're based in Michigan, so this is one particular county in Michigan in which
Mhm.
Tanesha was reading um, what needs to be included in that PPO in terms of that conduct. So if you're watching this and you live in another state, and if you have concerns or know of someone that has concerns about stalking and or what would go or what is required, excuse me, for that PPO, you would want to go to that court's
Mhm.
website to check out their resources and to see if they have something similar, or at least, talk to someone about this. Talk to a victim advocate, talk to someone
Mhm.
that's similarly situated, that's in, Tanisha's position as well. Like talk to those folks in those organizations because they can help you with this process. All I can say is just wow, wow, wow. We have covered a wealth of information tonight because there's so much that, I have learned, and there are takeaways that, you know, I can keep, as not only my regular profession, but also, in my capacity in which I serve in
Mhm.
ministry, because these are things that, again, I'm unaware of, and I've learned so much, so much new stuff tonight. And this is critically important because, again, this is an epidemic that is happening, both inside and outside of the church. I just wanted to share one other comment that Pastor Ash-Shakoor had shared a little bit earlier. I know we were in the midst of chit chatting, but he did provide a comment about Stockholm syndrome when we were in the middle of our discussion earlier. So I wanted to make sure I shared his comment. Um, Before we conclude, I first of all, I want to thank you, Tanesha, for coming back tonight. I know we had some technical difficulties, but
Yes.
once we got those kinks ironed out,
Bugger.
we were definitely flowing. I definitely want to thank all of those that have watched tonight. I want to thank all of our viewers. We thank you all for sharing your comments. We thank you all for sharing this, with your friends and family. Please share this with your friends and family. Again, we are live streaming tonight on Facebook. So this is going to be available both on my personal page and my professional page, Mary Bowen. I will make sure a copy of this is uploaded to Substack. The audio version of this podcast segment will be available on Spotify either later this evening or sometime tomorrow. We are also currently live streaming on YouTube as well. So the live stream, the video is going to be available on YouTube, and then that will be available basically for perpetuity. So that's not going to be pulled down at all. That's going to remain. I know for the Facebook live streams, they typically have a 30-day calendar in which they will eventually be removed, but I can always go back and upload the segments. So the segments are definitely available. Very quickly, I just want to say a quick prayer, very, very quick prayer, um, to all of our survivors that are out there. Just know that God loves you. God has his eyes. He has his face set towards you. And we just pray that he not only protect you and that he cover you, but we also pray that he will send Barnabases. We pray that he will send those that will encourage you, uplift you. We pray for godly friendships. We pray for resources. So where there is lack in the home, there will be resources in which you will be able to leave. We also pray that uh, for folks that are a part of your safety plan, we pray that
Yes.
they will have wisdom. They will have wisdom. They will know what to say and what to do. And I pray that the Lord give you wisdom concerning your safety plan. We pray for your safety. We just come against any harm, hurt, or danger,
Mhm.
every plot, plan, and scheme of the enemy. We render it null and void. You shall live and not die and declare the marvelous works of the Lord. We break every chain of bondage, every chain of abuse. We just pull down every mental stronghold that says you're not good enough, that says you're ugly, that says you won't ever get into another relationship, that you can't do better than me. We pull down all those destructive thoughts, and we just decree and declare life over you in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Jesus. Amen. Amen.
Tanesha,
Amen.
thank you again so much for doing the part two. This has been powerful. Um, what we'll do is for our viewers, again, please thank Tanesha for her time tonight. We definitely appreciate all that you've poured out. I pray that the Lord will restore and pour back into you what you have shared and poured
Thank
out
you.
tonight. I know we talked about the safety plan, and I believe there was something else we talked about. I know we talked about the
Yes.
dynamics of abuse. If you have a resource, and again, you don't have to give me the whole thing, but if you can just provide me with some of those tips, some of those excerpts, so I can post them to my other pages,
Absolutely.
because I definitely want to make sure that our audience has access to this, all of our followers have access to this information, because there were so many different scenarios that you shared, and I know we didn't have time to go into more detail, but I want to make sure that
Hmm.
um, our Singles Oasis viewers have access to that, to this
Absolutely.
information. Again, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Um, to our viewers, if you're not already, please follow the Singles Oasis on YouTube. We have a YouTube page. It's called The Singles Oasis. You can follow my professional page, Mary Bowen, where we will provide updates about our upcoming segments. You'll see all of our segments there. Please subscribe to the Spotify channel. It's called The Singles Oasis, where you can listen to the audio recording. So maybe you commute, you're driving, you're taking the metro or the subway and you're not able to watch it, but you want to listen to it. You can listen to it at work. The material will be available on Substack. So there are different mediums in which you can access the information. Again, if you need prayer or a listening ear, please feel free to reach out to us. We are here for you as a resource. And again, the Singles Oasis is a gathering space. This is a safe space for our singles. And we wanted to let you know that we are here for you. So again, we want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. And this is going to conclude our segment, but be on the lookout, because our upcoming segment more than likely will either be trauma or we're going to talk about shame. So we're going to have some more segments
Mm.
coming up in December. So be on the lookout for the flyers and announcements. So again, God bless you all. We love you with the love of the Lord, and we want to thank you for tuning in tonight. So take care, everyone. Bye-bye.